Today, all South African citizens live in a democratic society and have equal rights. However, for most of the 20th century, a political system that came to be known as apartheid assigned privileges and enforced laws based on race, keeping white South Africans separate from non-white South Africans. Black South Africans have lived with people of European descent since Dutch settlers began moving into the country in the 1600s. But white South Africans wanted to control the country. Beginning in the early 1900s, the government passed laws that established the legal segregation of racial groups, known as apartheid. Apartheid laws provided white South Africans with higher wages for the same jobs. These laws also evicted black South Africans from their land and made it illegal for black South Africans to travel anywhere without passes. Other laws prevented black South Africans from voting in elections and forced them to live on crowded reserves called Bantustans, which were located in arid and fertile areas. Without the ability to farm successfully, black South Africans became dependent on white South Africans in order to provide for themselves and their families. Many had to give up farming and work as servants or laborers. In 1912, black South African nationalists founded the political organization called the African National Congress to fight for justice and equality from the white minority government. ANC members included a small number of white South Africans who were sympathetic to the organization's goals. But their efforts made the government more restrictive. In the 1940s, the white minority government cracked down even more and extended the system of apartheid. Members of the African National Congress believed nonviolence and legal means were the way to fight apartheid. They protested unjust laws with marches, boycotts, and civil disobedience, the refusal to obey a law. But South Africa's white minority government fought to preserve apartheid through arrests, threats, and violence. Many white South Africans were not sensitive to the protests raised by black South Africans about apartheid. They lived in good homes, had well-paying jobs, and were free to travel wherever they liked. But for black South Africans, life on the reserves was a constant struggle. They held low-paying jobs and could not always find affordable housing or health care. Overcrowding made food and clean water scarce. Electricity was rare outside of the cities and suburbs where white South Africans lived. Many black South Africans were angry at their treatment by the government. They joined the African National Congress and protested for the end of apartheid and for equal rights. They tried to end apartheid by working to get the laws changed. In response, the government cracked down on both white and black people who opposed apartheid. Many white South Africans began to view black South Africans as dangerous terrorists who wanted to destroy both them and the government. But black South Africans said they were only trying to gain their freedom from an oppressive political system. Black South Africans suspected of being members of the African National Congress were often arrested and sent to jail. Some were murdered by South African police. The black South African struggle for freedom now included fighting for imprisoned members of the African National Congress, many of whom were abused and tortured in jail. Despite many of its members being killed or imprisoned, the African National Congress continued to exist in South Africa, inspiring others to fight for an end to apartheid. In the late 1900s, reformers like Archbishop Desmond Tutu would use the African National Congress nonviolent tactics to successfully bring about change. Archbishop Tutu would help expose the horrors of apartheid to the world. he would call for the end of apartheid, an end to the government ban against the African National Congress, and the release of all political prisoners. The struggle that the African National Congress began in 1912 would not end until the South African government finally rejected apartheid in 1989. Throughout the 1900s, the African National Congress was a leading force for civil rights in South Africa. Many courageous leaders, such as Nelson Mandela, worked to end apartheid, often at the cost of their freedom and their lives. Their legacy lives on in the African National Congress today.
Let us forget the past. Let us now work together to make this country a great country.
Did you know Black South Africans weren't the only ones affected by the apartheid system? South Africans of South and East Asian descent, as well as those of multiracial descent, were also kept separate from white South Africans.